Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on our fantastic planet. And welcome to another extra special. This is an extra special live stream where we're focused on change. So this is a special one because we've got two very special guests. Usually I'm talking to one person as part of our live stream series. We've got two extra special guests today. If this is the first time that you've joined one of our live streams, then thank you very much for being here. And if you've been here many times before, then thank you very much for returning back to see us. What we wanted to do today was to focus on these key aspects. And in the setup to this, in the lead up, we talked about the 7 things that we're going to cover as part of this when we're looking at change. So if you are, actually, we just got a shout out from Heather Palmer. I know Heather Palmer, as I'm sure many of the others do as well. So let us know where you're from. Let us know your city, your country, what organization you're from. Give a shout out to your team. Make this as interactive as possible. And as we go through, if you've got any thoughts, any questions, then please feel free to submit that. We've got one of the members of the team here live. I've just seen Rasha come up from Cairo. Hi to Rasha. So please feel free to share your thoughts as we go through, and we'll make this as interactive as possible. And of course, as we get towards the end of the conversation with our 2 experts, then please feel free to submit some questions and we'll get into that at detail. This is totally live from a lovely, warm, sunny, well, sort of warm, but definitely sunny central London. So things sometimes don't go to plan, but this is live. So we're going to run a very short intro, and then I very much look forward to welcoming our 2 extra special guests to this morning's live stream. Well, we do say here, as these live streams continue on, the intros get bigger and better. So there we go. We try and get bigger and better each time. So I've just seen we've got someone here from sunny Southampton. I don't know if anywhere is more sunny than Southampton right now. Darlington, maybe that's even more sunny than Southampton. Don't know. But a huge thank you. And someone very early from the US. This is very early for the US. Wow. So a huge thank you to you, Jen. We've got Jennifer Bryan here, and also, hi, Jennifer. People who don't know which person you are on the screen, we've got Jennifer Bryan here, and we've also got Lou Robey, and delighted to bring this live session to you, focusing on some really core aspects of change. So maybe if we could do a couple of quick intros, maybe Lou, if I could go to you first, if you could give us sort of 30, 60 seconds on who you are.
Yeah, well, thank you. Firstly, a lot of friends on the call, so I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you. So I'm Lou Robey, and I didn't grow up sort of in the conventional way and have that linear career that everybody expected you to have. So I've spent 4 decades from the age of 16 on the youth training scheme, started my life in the retail army at Marks and Spencer's, where I learnt my trade, and then went off to develop and distribute training materials around the world at 1.4 BBC Studios. And also, if anybody remembers John Cleese, I did some work with Video Arts and Melrose Films as well. But I've spent my life building educational background in leadership development. I was head of leadership development at the BBC, went on to be head of internal communications at the BBC, and then went on to be head of change at the BBC, leading probably one of the most historic programs of all time, Wayne, when I was part of a team of 14 people that decommissioned 7 buildings live on air into one building in New Broadcasting House. So that's been my biggest sort of life achievement. And having spent 25 years in change and leadership development, having developed leadership programs in partnership with Ashridge, it's brought us to where we are today. And that's why we're here.
Brilliant. Well, delighted. We're going to get into much of this and much more. As I said, we've got some sort of planned thoughts and questions. And of course, we usually go off script, so we'll see where we go. So thank you very much for being here, Lou. And Jennifer, what's the Jennifer story?
Hello, everybody. Fantastic to see everyone. This is really quite exciting. So my story, it's a bit of a squiggly one, I have to say, because I used to be a professional dancer and actress in New York. Did the whole Broadway thing, Royal Winnipeg Ballet School, the whole 9 yards. And when I came over to study at RADA, in London, and I did this very silly thing, and I met a whole bunch of people, which wasn't entirely silly, but this particular individual seemed to grow on me like fungus. And less than 2 years later, I married him. So there you have it. And I actually didn't know what I wanted to do at that point, because I knew I wanted to leave the theatrical business for a whole host of different reasons I won't go into here. But I had no clue what that was. And so I temped for a while and got very lucky and started being a PA to this SI director at a company now called Atos. And they asked me to design a presentation skills course. And so I was in my early 20s. So of course I went, well, sure. Okay, fine. And went and designed it and delivered my first session and came home and said, I know what I want to do with my life. So a whole new career was born at that point. And I learned very early on that there was no learning without change and no change without learning. So I've always approached change very much from that learning lens. I've worked with a plethora of different organizations across multiple different industries for well over 25 years now. I've done a lot of study and bring a lot of the theory and the frameworks to the forefront, and I've been published 3 times before the world-class change leader as well. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And one of my biggest, besides my kids, of course, the biggest achievements professionally is getting published by traditional publishers. They're not self-published, but traditional publishers. And the latest one on the emotional side of organizational change, How to Survive and Thrive with Routledge Publishing.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the latest book, because I know it's quite fresh out. So yeah, huge congrats. And I guess change has been a constant. I guess everybody's story, change is constant, right? My last corporate job was at BDO, the accountancy firm, and we did a timeline of the last 100-year history of the organization to try and present it to all the staff. And the fascinating thing was the only consistent thing about the last 100 years was turbulence and change. And it's a weird thing, isn't it? Because in the moment, you feel like the past has been more turbulent and the future is going to be less turbulent. The truth is the present is always fully turbulent. And as people often say, everyone wants change who's prepared to change, not many people actually. So I guess what we wanted to get into today is to understand a bit more about your thinking, your philosophy, your experiences of how to drive change. And I think there's a few different levels, aren't there? It's like what we can do to drive change organizationally. So you might have had an opportunity or be blessed to be in a position like Lou, actually, where you've got an opportunity to make a huge organizational wide change happen. And not many people get to that point in their careers, but I think there's a lot to learn from that. It could be that change is more focused in something more specific in the team, or it might be individually. So again, when we're focused on this today, this is not necessarily about if you're not in that position in a C-suite leader role to affect large-scale organizational change, then this isn't for you. Absolutely not. I think what we're focused on today is the stuff that we've learned, that Jen and Lou have learned specifically. And in a way, as we're listening to this, we're thinking, so what? What does that mean for me personally? And this is what I think the three of us, our commitment is to make sure that you can get something out of this which makes an impact for you both today and maybe even more immediately than today in the next few hours. And I think that was the whole design of what we've created with the Change Leader program, is how to help you practically to drive change that is valuable for you immediately. So on that, we've been around the world many times. I think we've now had about 250,000 managers through our programs in more than 50 countries now. And one of the consistent things we see everywhere, everyone talks about change. There's lots of change programs. There's no sort of lack of opportunities or things on offer of how to help us drive change. But the way that you've approached it, I think, is quite different, actually fundamentally different. I'm really excited to, again, understand a bit more and share that with everyone who's dialed in. So Lou, what is it that makes your approach to this different? Because there's lots of stuff out there, but what is the USP here?
Yeah, absolutely, Wayne. And I think, I think just from our intros, we've both come at this from completely different angles. And I think that, one of the things we're all noticing right now is the shift in the world, the way the world has shifted. I mean, who would have thought, less than a month ago, the whole of the Middle East would have to completely shift its business model. And leaders today are operating in a world that's just completely and utterly unprecedented. And there really isn't a playbook for the future. Every force there isn't an organization now that isn't going to have to change. Complacency is absolutely everybody's silent killer. We're seeing that, we've seen that societal, technological, geopolitical, generational, all of that is coming, well, you might argue in a perfect storm, but it's shifting us at a speed and a scale that actually we have never, ever navigated before. And change is no longer a project, it's an environment. And let's face it, Wayne, you know, I know, we work together. I mean, I don't know how many people on the call know this, but you and I did a little bit of a turn at the BBC together, which is how we met. And we interviewed the top 60 leaders, right? And every single one gave us a completely different answer about what they, or how they saw change. The expectation on leaders is so great. And, you know, we've never given enough training or opportunity for leaders to learn on the job to lead change. And yet all leaders now are expected to just show up and lead change. And so the expectations have changed. They're no longer just the decision makers. They're actually the people that have to create the experience. They have to be empathetic. They have to lead with courage. And actually, on top of all of that, they've got almost 6 generations navigating and coming in and being built within the organization. We're living longer, we're working longer, and we've got 800,000 kids right now out of work trying to get their first job. So all of this is about how we bring all those worlds together. I think from our perspective, what makes us different? Well, you know, Jen, for a start, brings the theory, the framework. She's already said, you know, she is a 3 times author. And I think she brings a lot of the theory and the models that perhaps some of the models that people haven't heard or seen before. What I think I bring actually is the messy, the high stakes, the reality. We're live on air. We've got to move 14,000 people here, there, and everywhere. But we can't go off air. They're really complex. And secondly, we have actually managed between us to have 50 years of experience in change, and we've managed to distill that into 7 practical steps that we can use right now immediately with our teams. Everything that we do, and we'll get into that in this program, but everything that we do, you can do right now in the middle of your change program. That's the most important thing. It's not just theory. And lastly, it's hybrid. Okay, so, and what we mean by that is you're not just learning about change, you're doing it, you're bringing your project, you're bringing your challenge, you're bringing it right to the program with us. And we're taking you right through the answers and the exercises and the opportunities that you can go back and do in real time with your team.
Awesome. So can we get into the first one then? We talk about clarifying the vision, and you mentioned before about, you know, the sort of often the not disparity is not the wrong word. It's the difference, I guess is an easier word, between how people see what we're meant to achieve here. So when we talk to your average leadership team, let's say that we've got 10 people and we give them all a sheet of paper and say, right, we would like you to write down what you think the vision is. And then we read the 10 pieces of paper and we've got 10 very, very different visions. And that's amongst the leadership team, let alone everyone else, especially if you've got thousands of people in the organization. So clarifying the vision, the first step here is looking at clarifying the vision. Just get your thoughts on that. How do you do that? Because again, it's not enough just to sort of clarify it and communicate it. How do you make sure that something lands?
Yeah, well, my personal feeling is if people can't feel it, they can't believe it, they can't see it, they can't do it, you know. And if you're going to just be somebody that comes out, a senior executive that walks out onto the, you know, the ring main or whatever it might be in your organization, onto the stage and say, this is what we're going to do by 2030, we're going to be biometric or whatever it might be. What does that mean? How does it, what does that mean for me? How am I going to get there? How am I going to do that? You know, the test is repetition in some ways. When we did West One, when we did the program, which, you know, as I keep saying, I was a team of 14 people that did that. But one of the very clear things about the vision was that it had to be really simple. Okay. So the vision actually was, we're on the road to West One. That was really tangible, Wayne. Everybody could understand it. It wasn't complicated, but what you then could do was unpack what it meant to them. But what it meant to them meant going back and asking them, what does that mean to you to be on the road to West One? What will that take? How will we get there? What do we need to do? What direction are we going to have to go in? What are we going to have to leave behind? What are we going to have to make sure we have in the future? And I think at that time, that was in 2003, we didn't have AI. We didn't have all those things. Now you can actually show people what the future is. You can touch it. You can feel it because we've got AI. So I think we can be quite clever actually, in how we help people shape their vision. So ask your team, if you had to decide without me, what would guide you? What would that look like? How would you move from vision to telling it? Ask them to see if they can tell you what they think the vision is. That's just some of the tasters, I guess, I'm trying to get to, that we would do practically, whether you're doing it through the digital program or whether you're doing that live with us in the classroom.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's a really powerful distinction about actually bringing it to life in a conversation, because in theory, things make a lot of sense, don't they? Even the act of just talking it out loud, even as you're saying the words, you start to realize to yourself, this doesn't sound very good, or actually doesn't feel as exciting as I thought it was. When you get into a conversation with someone, so it's a really good principle to use.
And also, if you're heavily unionized, just for example, because I've lived in a world we've been heavily unionized. You know, one of the other things I would say is bring those unions right to the forefront with you from the beginning. Don't wait to when you've got it all sussed, because they're going to help you and ensure that actually you're not going to run into too many problems either, because they're going to tell you where those challenges are in that vision. You know, so really worth thinking about that. And we'll get into that a bit more, I know, when we talk about stakeholders.
Yeah. And then, perfect link here. When you talk about stakeholders, when you think about leaders in the organization, leading with what we would hear, a lot of the commonly used language is leading with authenticity. I'm interested, Jen, on your thoughts on this, because it's such an overused word. And I don't think people really understand what it means. Does that mean exposing yourself? I don't mean physically. I mean, in terms of like being ultra vulnerable is what I mean, you know. And I think I've seen examples where leaders have taken this a little bit too far. They've shared stuff which you think, oh my God, but then they're saying, well, this is great, I'm vulnerable, this authentic leadership's, well, I don't know about that, maybe it's just stupid, I don't know. But yeah, there are certain things that you think, yeah, that's too much oversharing, but there are some things which, you know, are authentic leadership or aren't authentic. What does it actually mean? I think people could really do with some clarification here on what does that actually mean in practice.
Yeah, sure, of course. So really, you know, authenticity is very much it's the gap between intention and impact, and what that's all about. You know, it's not just about saying, oh, I've shared everything, so, you know, I'm being authentic. It's not. It's the impact that has, because leaders are not just decision makers. They are experience makers. And so their body language, their speed of response, how they react to situations and challenges, but also how they react to good things that happen. These are areas that people need to feel as if someone is along with them. They are there helping them through whatever it is, whether that's the good, the bad, or the ugly. So it's not about saying, am I being authentic? That's not the question a leader should be asking, in my opinion. It's much more of, how am I enabling others to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel confident, to feel capable, so that they can actually speak up and be themselves and within that environment. And that's about not making it personal so much, but making it much more observational. So, for example, I was working with a senior leader in a central government institution, and the senior leader was saying, they had recently taken over from someone else. They said, they're not doing what we talked about and agreed in the meeting. They're just not doing what we said they would do. And it kept happening to them over and over again. And I said, well, when you talk to them and when you make that agreement, what are you seeing? What's going on? And so that's where we flipped the conversation around to make it much more about the observation, and looked at different ways in which she could actually do things differently the next time round. So that's where we actually make the shift, is taking it away from the personal and making it much more observational.
Okay. And I'm interested in in the way you described at the beginning with looking at driving impact. So how do you measure that impact? I know it sounds like a very simple question, but, you know, what would you say would be the result? So, you know, when you talk to a leader and say, what result would you like to see as a result of you being more authentic? You know, what would you see coming back from the rest of the team or the rest of the organizational department?
So it's very much, it's about seeing the results. So in the example that I gave before, with that particular leader, people weren't doing what as far as she was concerned, they had agreed to do. And
Right.
so what she realized is she needed to change her entire leadership style and how she came across. She thought she was being very coaching and very open and so forth. But the team had actually come from a much more dictatorial leader prior to, so they didn't believe her. They didn't believe that she was actually asking them these questions. They thought that she was just saying it for the sake of it. So what we got her to do is say, instead of filling the gaps, pause and just let them actually come to you with the answers rather than you giving the answers. Just wait and genuinely wait for them to give the answer. And that's when they went, oh, she really wants to hear what I think, not this isn't just lip service.
Well, this is interesting in our world because we see this like sea of failed innovation programs in organizations where people say things. A classic one is, and I think we've got some of the people from TFL on the line as well. So shout out to TFL. I was with TFL last week. And one of the things I was talking with them about was a lot of leaders say, I've got an open door policy. And then, and we, I would sort of say, well, that sounds lovely. How many people come through your door? And they're like, well, no one. So well, that's working really well for you then, isn't it? It's a nice intent to have. It's a noble intent. But if the actual impact of it is no one's walking through your door, and what we found in our data is 82% of managers, and this is based on 15,500 managers that we listened to last year, believe that the products or services of the organization could be better. So the whole idea here commercially of inviting, and I want to ask you some interesting your thoughts on this, Lou, as well. When you think about inviting like diverse thinking, is actually a commercial imperative, because it turns out, based on what we've seen, that the majority of people have got a strong willingness to give feedback about the way the operation's working, the way the products and processes are working, the way the teams work, the way the customer feels. But no one's really listening, and no one's really inviting that either. So I think if the outcome of more authentic leadership could be a better feedback loop, a faster feedback loop as an organization, then I suspect operationally organizations will be much stronger. So commercially, it's like a very clever thing to do, both being more authentic as a leader, and of course the result of that could be, I'm interested in your thoughts here on how do you actively invite diverse thinking. So I think that's so key.
Well, I don't know if she's on the call, and I hope she doesn't mind, but I sit on the advisory board of a change consultancy called UNA. And the reason why I'm saying that is when I went to sit on that board, I was absolutely blown away by the age group and the diversity of people in business that she had invited onto her advisory board. And I think that is a perfect example of where you really start to think outside the box and inviting diverse thinking, because we had, the youngest generation possible sitting at that table with the oldest generation possible sitting at that table. But we also have people from industries you just wouldn't imagine sitting at that table, because they were able to give perspective on what was going on in the world that would be able to help her to navigate her business. So I hope she doesn't mind me calling that out. But I think what I'm seeing here in terms of inviting diverse thinking, Wayne, we just don't have the answers anymore. It's absolutely impossible for any leader now to know the answer. Impossible, because we don't know what we don't know, right? We also know that actually, as an example, if you're an engineer right now, you actually can get a job as an engineer having a fine arts degree. That is a fundamental shift in how we're thinking about how we're employing people, how we're getting different conversations. I remember a conversation where one leader spoke to HR in a particular organization and said, I know these are all the policies in order and how to work, but I'm going to now do different ways of running my projects. I'm just going to go and pick people from the business, and I'm going to get them to come and work with me for a period of time on sprints. I'm going to be really agile because I'm not going to sit and interview them and do all these things that you're going to ask me to do. I just want quick sprints, agile opportunities, test pilot, and make sure that we're going to do this correctly. I think that is where businesses have to get to now. 15% of businesses that actually invite diverse thinking as part of their innovation, it's proven, actually now are the leaders in their business.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so. The last conversation we had was with a brilliant lady called Martha Harvey-Jones, who's the CEO of Leithwaite, the exec search firm. And then before Martha, I spoke with Alison Brogan, who's the CFO of Bidcorp. I mean, both of them are tremendously accomplished. And if you, in a strange world of when we look at change and everything people related in most organizations, this type of conversation bounces between the CEO and the HRD, or the CPO and the CEO. And often we've got an interesting character in this mix who doesn't get involved, right? Which is often the CFO who sort of sits there, because they know the numbers better than anybody else. And they're looking at this conversation thinking, are you joking? Because they understand how much people cost. They understand all the investment that they make in training and all the other stuff that goes into it. And often we employ people because they've got this tapestry of knowledge and experience and skill. And how much of it do you actually utilize? Quite a small percentage, actually. You employ somebody because they're great at doing all this stuff. And we say, don't worry about, 50% of that, 50% of the time spend doing X, and it hacks people off. So I think what you're describing has got a huge commercial impact, again, because it's the talent utilization or lack of talent utilization, both for the organization, which is a shame and it's a waste, and individually tremendously frustrating. And it's the single biggest reason why people tend to leave the organization. So, when we say people leave managers, not the company, that is true. The reason why they leave the managers is because they feel there's a lack of development opportunity or skills aren't being utilized. So again,
we get pigeonholed. I mean, I know that I've worked in an organization for 25 years, public sector. Well, I just had a number or a letter that described where I sat in the organization, right? But I have many other skills that I probably could have used that could have enhanced the business. I see managers actually cry out to help in other areas of the business. And actually it sort of was, well, no, you can't work there because you work here. Well, actually, we need to be far more agile in our thinking about how we use our workforces and our leaders and our teams. And actually create that big diverse thinking in. And we give perspective on that, by the way, Wayne, in the program, and we give big exercises and thinking styles, and we actually throw people into situations to start to really feel what that looks like.
Yeah, very good. So in the fourth area, the fourth chapter of what you're focusing on, this whole idea of communicating with intent, I think this is a fascinating area. Jen, I'd love some of your thoughts on this, especially with some of your published work as well, of the idea around what this is and how to apply it. I mean, we see fascinating things in this area because you've often got senior teams who've got a message to communicate and aren't that actually intentional about how they go about it, and they get quite poor results. And actually, you can take quite a simple message and do a good job of it and get amazing results in terms of performance improvement. So I'm interested with communicating with intent. What's that all about? And again, practically, what does that look like for me?
So communicating with intent is actually understanding where your audience is coming from. You need to meet them where they are at in that moment in time. So understanding how they are thinking and feeling about life at the moment, much less the organization and change and what that's all about, so that you can create the messages that are actually going to sink in. I mean, first of all, it takes 5 to 7 times for a message to sink into our heads. And for anybody who's got kids, you can try this on your little ones. I did try it on my son once upon a time, because he was terrible at remembering to go brush his teeth by the time he started to go up to the stairs and got to the top of the stairs. So it is something that we need to, it's not just repeating though, it's repeating with a message that's going to sink in. And it's only going to sink in if it's something that we are willing and able to hear. We have the capacity to actually hear it. So when we're looking at communicating with intent, it's having the intention, understanding the intention of what it is we are trying to communicate, but much more important, how the other person's going to be receiving it. And a lot of leaders get a bit concerned when it comes to that and think, oh, well, that's just if I do that, then people are just going to resist what I'm saying. They're not listening to me because they don't like what I'm saying. And I'm saying, which is, in my opinion, there's elements, people aren't going to like everything we say. I mean, let's face it, we don't like what everybody who we love and care about is going to say to us at all the time. But it's information. That is actually what resistance is all about, because resistance is natural. We are, when it comes to change, a lot of leaders talk about how, oh, Jennifer, people just don't like change. And I'm like, that's nonsense. It's not that people don't like change. They don't like being changed. But if they are making the decision themselves to change, they're fine with it. So when it comes to resistance, resistance is completely and utterly normal. You know, even on a positive change, if we were to say everybody's won the lottery, or you get your lottery ticket and you're looking at the numbers and you actually more numbers are coming up, you're checking and you're double checking and you're, you know, thrice checking and you're rechecking, you're checking, and you're handing it to somebody else going, is that really saying what I think it says? That's resistance. And so, you know, it's not that resistance isn't the problem, is where I'm getting at. It is very much information for us to utilize. And I was working for a huge global financial institution. I won't name them here. And they were getting a load of resistance on a change. To be fair, actually, a lot of people were looking forward to when they made the announcement. They were like, yes, let's do it. And they were getting a lot of resistance at that time. But what I actually did is I worked with them to say, it's not the change that they're worried about. They are still really excited about it. It's how it's been managed up until this point. They don't feel invited in to the conversation. I said, you've got some employee engagement groups that are very active in all these different other areas of your business, but you're not engaging them here. And I was like, why not? You know, let's engage them and get them really involved. And the CEO at the time, he was a bit concerned about that. He thought that would be opening the doors up. He would say, that's opening the floodgates. And I said, well, let's try it on something small then. We've got a town hall coming up about this. Let's try it on that. And so we said, let's set it up before they go into the town hall. There's always, you know, everyone's been to a town hall. You've got that kind of marketplace feel. And I said, let's set it up as a learning platform and get all the different engagement groups to pick areas of this particular change that they could educate people on and different ways in which they could do it and see how that goes. Oh my gosh, it was like night and day. People were thrilled. And they finally got enthused again. The engagement groups were over the moon. They got to create. They got to do something, be involved. They got to actually go and talk to other people about the change, but what they're going to be doing with it and how they're going to be doing with it. And it just was night and day, absolutely night and day.
Whoa. I'm sort of struck by the bit about the communication, how many times you probably need to communicate something. I think that's really important. And I think, like to your latter point about the context, you know, to try and explain the context and the reasons why. You know, someone said to me before, you know, human beings, we start asking why around sort of, you know, 1.5, 2 years old and never stop. And we've always got that desire to understand why. But if you think from an organizational communication point of view, often the context is gone. You just get a bunch of stuff and you don't get an opportunity to really understand what it means for yourself. And we all interpret things totally different. And it was making me think on the timeline, because my wife and I have been married more than 20 years. She's a psychologist. So imagine my life, you know, and she says to me, she says, I don't get it. You know, I tell you every Wednesday, you got to take the bins out tomorrow, every Wednesday for the last however many years. And I still mess up. So it's hard for all of us. I'm interested in the sort of the stakeholder element of this, because when you talk about, and we talked before about senior stakeholders and how to engage stakeholders and build some of those relationships, and that can feel easy for some people, depends on how good you are at networking and building, you know, new relationships, and for others can be tremendously difficult. I'm interested as well, Lou, on your view on this one, because again, you know, you've been in that situation where you've had to build very senior stakeholder relationships, and I think in order to drive any change or to get support or to get sponsorship from senior people, you definitely need to build those senior level relationships. So, you know, again, I think that the $1 million question is, how do you do it? Because lots of people look at people that do it and think, how do they do that? And I'd love to get your thoughts on how to.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I just say is that, you know, you're not always the most senior person in change, right? So you're having to go and talk to, well, you know, we've done it, Wayne, together, and Heather on the call as well, and other people. Well, it's Tony Patter's here. I've seen a few names. You know, we have to go and speak to people at completely different levels in the organisation and win them over. And I think that one of the things I built, and I'm actually quite proud of it because I've walked away and named it the Wheel of Fortune, and I've sort of designed within the program an opportunity for you to look at your wheel and think about who is it that's in this organization that's going to be able to help me to get the change over the line. Who is actually leading change in the first place in the organization, and what change are they leading, and does that actually affect me, and is that part of what I'm doing, and how do I think about those people? And then there'll be lots of people that are trying to do lots of different things that you need that they may not know that they need, and they need them. So I'm just checking, Wayne, that you're still there because you've gone off screen. Sorry, I'm just checking that we didn't lose the signal there before I carried on speaking. You've gone on mute. I can't hear you.
It is definitely live. There's someone drilling outside. I'm just behind the BBC building, interestingly. So yeah, I can't blame it on them, but someone's drilling.
Well, it's ironic because I've just stopped the builders drilling next door my house. So
yeah, they must have come to me and drilled near me.
So just to go back to that, you know, what we're trying to do is to help people to really understand their wheel of fortune. Okay, so start to think about who in the organization is already doing some of that change. One of the things I think could be really helpful is look at those people that are doing the change really well, so you can actually take some lessons and use them as examples and play it back to people in the organization. Why are they embracing that? Why are they doing that? What are they doing differently? Every stakeholder you need, they're also going to be worried about what you need and why you need it. But they're also going to be disruptors. They're going to be blockers. There's going to be all sorts of things. So it's about where do you take your time and where do you go and influence? And I know I've had to, I mean, my goodness me, I can tell you that there were many people in the BBC didn't want to do anything that we wanted them to do. Absolutely 100% not. Same at WGSN, same at Bauer, wherever I've worked before. It's about how you sit with them, how you listen, how you understand their pain. How do you take, 18 systems into one and make sure that it try and suits all those people that are using 18 systems? You have to listen and you have to understand their pain. So for me, it's about, in all honesty, really, it's about talking to every stakeholder, understanding what they're worried about, making sure that you can bring them together to have the discussion, and an awareness check, really. Do the list, check the people, find out who you need to bring with you. And lastly, bring every militant disruptor close.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, because that's where the energy is, right? That's where the
right. And when you get it right, when you suddenly have got nowhere to put bicycles, for example, or drying rooms and all the things that people care about, and you manage to get 3 drying rooms or 1 drying room and 3 showers and 800 bikes or 600 bikes in, and somebody says that's still not good enough, those militant people are going, actually, do you know what? You should have seen what you were going to have. This is amazing. They come with you, they tell the story, and they help you land change with impact.
Yeah, totally. And then when it comes to, I guess, as people become more senior in organizations, often what happens is they become not more okay with, but they're able to cope with, is probably a better word, to cope with a large amount of uncertainty and complexity. Because, often what differentiates someone very senior from those who aren't is often they are able to sort of see the organization in their mind anyway, and be able to make, in some cases, quite difficult decisions in complex situations, complex problem solving, as we would call it. So I'm interested, Jen, on your thoughts on this, because as like you say, people don't really want to change, but in order to drive change at certainly senior levels in organizations, you've got to be able to solve some quite complex problems. And in many cases, you don't know the answer. I was working with a guy many years ago who runs a big cosmetics business. I won't say who he is. Fascinating guy. And we were standing behind the stage. He's about to go and talk to 300 people. And we were talking about his organizational vision because he hadn't figured it out yet. And he's about to go talk to his 300 salespeople. And it was amazing because he said, right, okay, got it. And he walked out on stage and shared it. And everyone was like raving about this. And I'm like, I'm watching this happen. And it was this epiphany moment for me. I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. He just made that up. I saw him just behind the curtain, just made that up. But of course, that's every organizational vision is made in the same way, isn't it? Yeah, there might be more data and you might have some more smart people with some numbers involved and some thought. But in truth, they're all totally made up from scratch. They become self-fulfilling prophecies if enough people believe in them. And that's pretty much how it works. But I guess, you know, it takes some level of seniority to accept that there is a tremendous amount of variable and randomness that goes into this and be able to solve complex problems. So I'm interested in your thoughts on complex problem solving and that, again, how that works in the change process as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, first of all, nobody, and I mean nobody, is the guru of all information. And that is the first thing to recognize when it comes to complex problem solving. Nobody can know everything. And you know what? No one should. Because as Lou talked about earlier in regards to inviting some diverse thinking, you know, when we talked about the authentic leadership and understanding how we need to make the environment feel safe for others, when it comes to complex problem solving, we need to recognize what we know, what we don't know, what we're willing to explore, what we can't explore, and what is in the world of the possible at the end of the day. And when you approach things in that way, trust goes up. People go, oh, okay. All right. So you don't know everything, but you're okay with that. And being comfortable with that is really key. Miriam Margolyes, actually, in one of her autobiographies, I love Miriam Margolyes, by the way, and she actually says in one of her autobiographies that isn't a certain level of uncertainty a good thing? And when you've got complex problems, there is going to be a level of uncertainty. And when I read that in one of her books, I sat there and was like, oh my goodness, of course, because we don't want, first of all, to know everything when it comes to our own personal lives and the people who we love and care about. So, but we need to get comfortable and feel okay about embracing that level of uncertainty, because the most brilliant thing about uncertainty is that it gives us the permission to be creative, to ask the questions, what if, maybe, do you think, what about? And that's actually allows us the ability to look at the different problems and the different challenges ever so slightly differently, so that we can explore different elements of what's going on. So the big things we need to do is to slow down rather than speed up. You know, not everything, Rome's not built in a day. We don't have to solve everything immediately within the first 2 seconds. And usually when we slow down, we are able to take a few minutes to actually go, well, is this right? What about if we tried it a different way? And if we did it that way, what would that do? And how would that have an impact? And it gives us that opportunity to be creative, to explore different options that could be better than had we just gone in and done it what we first thought about. And on top of that, we need to also then separate facts from assumptions, because many times we look at our own assumptions as if they're actual facts, and when they aren't facts. We're assuming that that's the case. And so we need to actually take a look and separate that out and analyze, what's going on there? Am I assuming that's the case? So for example, am I assuming that when I send my budget up to the board to be approved, that they're going to give me the money that I need to actually deliver this? Or are they going to come up with some arbitrary number? You know, we need to actually take a look at that. We also look at the multiple different lenses, break it down. And we need to engage people a lot earlier to get their ideas, their thoughts, because as again, Lou talked about earlier, with that inviting diverse thinking, when you bring people on board early and get different lenses on it, you uncover things that you wouldn't have uncovered quite possibly certainly yourself. And also, if you had just gone in and done it straight away in the first way that you thought you were going to do it, because usually you do that because that's how you've done it before. But we're in a different world.
Can I throw you a curveball question on this one? Because I think a lot of people would say that they've got, you think of the typical toxic manager, toxic leader, which comes up in conversation a lot in our world, especially when it comes to driving change, right? Because you're always going to get that blocker, that resistor, that, for whatever reason. And you've got people that got the empathic ability to see things from other people's perspectives. And, of all of the thousands of leaders we've come across, I've definitely met a good few that would probably be described by my wife as a sociopath, even psychopath, actually, in some cases. Because you think psychopathy in a general population is, 1% or whatever it is. And you're going to meet a disproportionate number of psychopaths and sociopaths in organizations, especially those that have a lot of structure and hierarchy to them. It tends to be where people gravitate to. So what happens when you come across that type of person? Because, they're kind of incapable of seeing things from other people's perspectives because they're just chemically, like, or whatever the word is, they're not wired that way. So I'm just interested, how do you cope with that, the psycho? Not the hide in the bushes want to kill psycho, but
I would say they're psycho. I wouldn't go down that road, that's for sure. It's very much asking them a question, saying, what, many times it's using visual aids. We are a very visual society. Back in Shakespeare's day, it was auditory. Nowadays, it's visual. And so sometimes it's about just showing a picture. Say, okay, well, let me show you this picture. What do you think? And it could, and it could be a Rothko, it could be a Klee, it could be a Renoir, it could be anything. It could just be a photograph and say, what do you see here? And they will spout out their first things, the first things they see in that particular picture, and say, oh, that's really fascinating. You know what I see? I see this, I see that, I see that. And different go, oh, I hadn't seen it that way. And there's a lot of pictures out there with the visual different elements. And we've got one of them in our workbook as well, of the old lady versus the young lady. And there's a lot of others with the two old people in the cup and various other things as well. But it's about looking at a picture when they go, oh, I hadn't seen it quite like that. Yeah. You go, that's how we need to approach different problems. It's because we can't see everything all the time. Yeah. None of us, nobody is the guru of all information. Nobody.
Wayne, can I just add one really important thing here, because it's quite a different thing to what we're offering, and I think it's really important just to bring it in terms of that question. We, in terms of inviting diverse thinking, we went out and looked for experts that could help us really challenge our thinking when we were writing this program. And there's a guy called Nigel Kirkpatrick, because I can't see who's on this call. He may even be on this call, so if he is, maybe he could say hello in the chat. But Nigel Kirkpatrick has actually written a book called The 10 Traits. Oh God, I've suddenly had a senior moment. Isn't that absolutely?
Compassionate leadership.
That's just terrible. The 10 Traits of Becoming a Compassionate Leader. And he wrote this book. And the reason why he wrote this book, and the reason why he has actually helped us with one of our steps, is because he actually understands what it is to be the most toxic leader in a tech organization, a really large tech organization. And he talks about the courage that you need to think and to invite, whether it's diverse thinking, to lead with empathy, all of those things. And we spent quite a lot of time with him in developing one of our modules. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to say that it's a really important question that you ask, and we tackle it a lot in the program in one of our modules.
Yeah, very good. Because it comes up a lot in our conversation with managers, and is a tremendously frustrating character that lots of us have met on the journey to drive change or be better. Lou, one final question I'd love to ask you before we can get into a couple of the questions from people that are connected in. And this is to do with the whole idea of looking at like change fatigue. There's no one sitting around saying, more change, please. I'd love some more change.
Another Routemaster bus, right? That doesn't fit anywhere.
That's right. No one wants any more. But and what we find is, like, if we come across a pub chain that we worked with, and that was interesting because they've got an 80% staff turnover. And the lady was saying who looks after HR was saying to me, it's fantastic because every year you can pretty much go in and say, right, guys, we've got vision and values. Everyone's like, yeah, vision and values. And the next year you can go in and say, we've got vision and values. Everyone says, yeah, vision and values, because everyone's new again. Fantastic. But the problem is in some organizations where you've got people that have been there for 20, 30 years, you know, logic suggests that if you've been there 20 years, you've seen 5, 6, 7 big different change programs. And actually evidence suggests that if you just keep your head down, this will pass. And why should I engage with this? Because I've seen this before. And it's not because people are cynical. They have seen it before, and maybe not much happened or changed in their world. So I'm interested with this sort of final one of, you know, how do you overcome some of this change fatigue in a way? And then does that mean something about how you drive change with purpose? And what does that mean?
Yeah, I think you have to keep asking your team why this still matters. You know, you have to have honest conversations. Some people need to get off the bus at this point. I think there are people that just are tired and can't come on the bus anymore, and we need to be grown up and realistic about that. And you know, maybe you need a few more new passengers to come with you on the bus. But I think the real thing is it's about building a weekly ritual. It's about inviting and talking, and the communication with impact, which Jen talked about really keeping the conversation going, understanding the challenges, moving everybody at the same pace, getting people to feel protected. We haven't talked about the psychological safety because we haven't got time, but we talk about that in the program. Keep the purpose front of center. If we go back to the first example, just for quickness, that I talked about, the Road to West One, that was a 10-year program. How do you really keep people excited about being on the road to West One? You know, what can you do to keep that constant? Why are we going on the road to the West One? What's the direction? What's the purpose? How far are we? Time-lapse films, where are we? How are we getting there? What have we encountered? What are we up against? All of those things, purpose, alignment, reconnecting to objectives within the business is another key one. And lastly, Wayne, you know, keep celebrating the wins, talk about the benefits, keep showing what's going to be great, but you know, be real, keep it real. But one of the biggest mistakes, I think, and I just did a very big talk to I can't say who because I'm under NDA, but they were the top 7 in the room. And one of the key things they actually admitted to in the room was the fact that if they don't know what to say, they go silent. Don't go silent. That is when you create the most fear. You know, so really, questions are coming in, right? So don't keep siloing. Keep the questions coming. It's a great segue now to you, Wayne.
That was beautiful, Lou. That was beautiful.
Right on cue. What can I tell you?
You're a professional. Absolutely professional. So just so everyone connected in, we see the question the same time you see the question. So let's see what we got. So from Harriet Atwood, what advice, or I'm reading this not because you can't read, but because we've got people who might just be listening. What advice, stroke tools or tips would you give to managers who are leading and supporting teams through restructures likely to adversely affect team members? Well, brilliant question. Thank you very much, Harriet. Lou, Jen, over to you.
Yeah. So shall I take this one, Lou? Or I'll kick us off. So there's a lot of different tools and tips that we share in the book and within the workbook. But the big thing I would say, it's about making sure that you're including everyone in those conversations. So many times in my experience, a lot of leaders, they focus on the people who may end up leaving and not focusing on the people who end up staying. And as a result, the people staying end up feeling quite guilty because they're the ones that are left behind. They are also many times feel as if they should feel bad or they want to celebrate, but they can't celebrate. But also the people who are leaving are feeling, you know, what do we do and how do we go about it? So it's about, first of all, focusing on everybody. It's not just one or the other, but 2, it's also the people who are leaving, helping them make that transition, whatever that may be. I've been in a situation myself where I had to make not just my team redundant, myself redundant as well. And it was very much about asking them, what do you want? If the world was your oyster, you could do whatever you want. What would that be? And then it was about trying to help them enable that in some way. So that's that's what I would say. Lou, do you have something you want to add to that?
I just want to add a slightly different perspective, because I was in an example where one leader came on and celebrated all the people that were going to stay. It felt like two lifeboats, one that arrived and one that didn't. And the reason why I say that is I agree with everything that you said, Jen, but having been in a situation where my lifeboat didn't arrive for my team ever, that just felt really uncomfortable. So I think it's really important to, you know, show what's going to be great for the people that are going to stay, because you need them to come on the change journey. But the Japanese do this really well, Wayne, I think. You know, I don't know if we've got anyone here from Japan, but, you know, they really celebrate the people that are leaving and what they've done really well. And I know when I was leaving the BBC, and hats off to Susan Lavelle for this one, but she got me to do a podcast on everything that I saw and learned over 25 years in the BBC, and hand back some of that knowledge to people in the BBC about what they could do. So she wasn't just celebrating me, and I don't mean that because of me, but she was showing all the work that the team or me or whoever else had done. And we did that for people. So I think there's really something you can do about making people really good about themselves, building them up. And as Jen said, you know, give them a pathway out. Who do you know in your network? Who can you introduce them to? I've seen a lot of people on LinkedIn now saying, this guy's great. He's done all this work for me in the past. He's just in not the right place right now. Or can you help her? So those are just some other thoughts.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think we've probably got time for one last question. Oh, another question there. There we go. Perfect. And then what we'll do is, for any of the questions that we've not managed to answer live, we always follow up and answer those questions, whether those are on the LinkedIn link or through direct email registration, whichever it is, we'll get back to you on those as well. So last question from Frank Dollar. Cool name, Frank Dollar. What would you say is the most important? It's cooler than Wayne, isn't it? Frank Dollar. If I was going to choose a name, it'd be Frank Dollar. What would you say is the most important KPI used that quantifies whether a change intervention has been a proven success? Wow, great question, Frank. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Lou, you want to keep...
Oh, well, yeah. For me, about a KPI, whether it's quantified the change, I think it's about what people are saying, what people are doing. I'm not necessarily saying engagement surveys, but we've done lots of ways of playing it back through storytelling. We did a great one in BBC Wales. I think this is a super example. We were doing things around the values. We did a whole story about values into action. We were able to demonstrate where those values were being done and taken into action. And it was done by the team itself, the people that were actually making that change and what the audience had said. And I think when you can play back what your customers or your audience are therefore saying about you, you know whether you're landing well or not. So I know a lot of people are looking for me to tell you about a graph you could use or a pie chart or any of those things. But for me, verbatim storytelling, playing it back. I know I've come from a very creative background, but we've got lots of technology out there right now that can help us. But I really believe that the power of what's going well and what's not going well is done through what you're hearing and what you're seeing. So for me, it's about playing that back and using those stories throughout your time, throughout your change, back into the organization and for those wins.
Yeah, I would like to add, from my experience, it's about getting underneath what's actually going on, what's driving the change for the people. So what are they thinking, feeling, and how are they feeling, why this is important to them? And then quantifying that, getting that, asking that question, first of all, before the change ever kicks off, and getting an understanding of what that means and what that is. And then asking them after the change, so you can show the before and the after. That's really powerful. And because it's coming from an emotional place, people feel a lot more attached to it and engaged. And it's extraordinarily powerful as a KPI as well to leadership, because they go, oh, they felt like that, and now they feel like this. Wow, that's incredible. And so that, to me, that's something that works really, really well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to end it here because time is upon us. Just a huge thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, Bryan. So if you want to connect with Jennifer on LinkedIn, if you're not already connected, then please do. And thank you very much, Lou Robey. Brilliant as always. I mean, so many insights. I'm not going to even attempt to summarize that. I'd fail. But there's just so many brilliant takeaway points. I think at the beginning, our intention for this live stream is that we'd create some super practical things that all of us can do. And I think, I've been sort of party to lots and lots of conversations in this area of change, but also I've picked up tons of great stuff from both of you. So thank you so much for conversation, for your generosity of being so open and sharing some of these insights as well. If you want to learn more about the World Class Change Leader Program, you can click the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And maybe if I could invite Jennifer and Lou back again in a few months with some more feedback on how the program's going and some of the results you're seeing as well. That'd be wonderful if you would be back with us.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
I know,
Yeah,
awesome.
and I'm loving the Wayne. Look at that. Really inspiring, very insightful. I'm just so pleased that we've been able to do that and offer some wisdom.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Again, thank you very much. And a huge thank you, of course, to everyone tuned in for this very special live stream. Thank you, Phil. There you go. And we look forward very much to seeing you on the next session, which we don't know the date yet, but we will advertise it very soon. And have a fantastic rest of the week if we don't see you before. Thank you again. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.